The World News Today is being brought to you by One Solar Solution. Check out how you can get those solar panels installed at your home or residence by going to onesolarsolution.com. Bringing you the world news coming up next. This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. Wildfires have burned through a record number of acres in California this year as firefighters continue to battle several large blazes across the state. The state's Department of Forestry and Fire Protection says more than 2 million acres have burned, more than the size of Delaware. One fire, the El Dorado, which has spread over 7,000 acres, was started by a gender reveal party. California is also currently experiencing a record heat wave. Los Angeles County reported its highest ever temperature of 121 degrees. Although temperatures are expected to drop from today onwards, it may bring strong winds which could fan the flames, according to the National Weather Service warning. New wildfires ravaged bone-dry California during the scorching Labor Day weekend that saw a dramatic airlift of more than 200 people trapped by flames and ended with the state's largest utility turning off power to 172,000 customers to try to prevent its power lines and other equipment from sparking more fires. Multiple people were reportedly arrested after a rally involving Trump supporters and right-wing activists outside the Oregon state capitol in Salem that turned violent yesterday. Hundreds of people had gathered on Labor Day in a small town south of Portland for a pro-President Donald Trump vehicle rally just over a week after members of a far-right group had also experienced one of them fatally shot after a Trump caravan went through Oregon's largest city. Vaccine developers pledge to uphold testing rigor. 9 leading U.S. and European vaccine developers pledge to uphold the scientific standards that their experimental immunizations will be held against amid a hurried global race to contain the pandemic. The companies, including Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca, in a joint statement made a historic pledge to uphold the integrity of the scientific process as they work towards potential global regulatory filings and approvals of the first COVID-19 vaccines. President Trump hinted yesterday that the U.S. could approve a coronavirus vaccine in October ahead of the November election, as Joe Biden demanded transparency from the government as it studies the shots. The prospect of a vaccine to shield Americans from coronavirus infection emerged as a point of contention in the White House race as President Trump accused Democrats of disparaging for political gain a vaccine he repeatedly has said could be available before the election. President Trump, accused by Joe Biden of putting lives at risk in his handling of the coronavirus, called his Democratic rival, and I quote, stupid, and demanded an apology for what Trump called anti-vaccine rhetoric. With less than 2 months to go until the U.S. election, President Trump is having trouble energizing his core supporters, especially while voters without college degrees who were key to his victory in 2016. The analysis that came out based on Reuters and an Ipsos national opinion polling from May to August and 2016 exit poll data found that Trump has lost support among non-college educated whites who made up 44% of the U.S. electorate 4 years ago and heavily favored the Republican over Democrat Hillary Clinton. Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives have called for the immediate suspension of Postmaster General Louis DeJoy as they launch an investigation into his testimony to lawmakers. President Trump says he's open to an investigation of Postmaster General following published reports that former employees of DeJoy, a major donor to Trump, and other Republicans said they felt pressure to make campaign contributions to GOP candidates. President Trump demanded that a reporter remove his face mask in the middle of a question at a White House press briefing yesterday, but the journalist refused. At least 11 people have been killed in 3 separate group killings in Colombia, one of the deadliest since FARC guerrillas' days signed a peace accord with the government in 2016. The massacres, homicides of 3 or more people in the same event took place in the past 3 days in the regions in the northwest part, Bolivar in the north and Caesar in the northeast of the country. And a Saudi court has issued final verdicts in the case of slain Washington Post columnist and Saudi critic Jamal Khashoggi after his son, who still resides in the kingdom, announced pardons that spared 5 of the convicted individuals from execution. The Saudi trial into the killing of critic Jamal Khashoggi has lacked transparency and fallen short on assigning accountability for the crime, according to the UN Human Rights Office in Geneva. And Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi group has said it aimed a number of drones at Saudi Arabia's Aba International Airport early this morning and put it out of action for several hours. The feud between Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the ruling party in the strategically important Tigray region is escalating, raising fears of military confrontation and the breakup of Africa's second most populous nation. A 3-month state of emergency has been declared in Sudan as it is engulfed by deadly floods that are quickly spelling out a humanitarian disaster. Rwandan president has said that the polarizing hero of the Hotel Rwanda film had returned home of his own accord, where he was arrested, denying his family's claims he was kidnapped abroad. And Denmark says that Tunisia is responsible for receiving the 27 migrants who were rescued in the Mediterranean by a Danish-flagged chemical tanker. The European Union warned Serbia and Kosovo that they could undermine the European Union membership hopes by moving their Israeli embassies to Jerusalem, as President Trump's surprise announcement about the change left officials in Belgrade and Pristina scrambling to limit the political fallout. After being placed in a medically induced coma, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is being weaned off mechanical ventilation and is responding to verbal stimuli. The top United Nations Human Rights Office has called on Russia to conduct or cooperate with a fully independent investigation into Germany's unequivocal findings that opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with Novichok nerve agent. UK and European Union negotiators resume Brexit talks after warnings last-minute changes to domestic legislation risk derailing the process, threatened peace in Northern Ireland, and even a showcase UK-US trade deal. All 22 teams will start the 10th stage of the Tour de France after their riders tested negative for COVID-19, adding that 4 members of staff, though, had returned positive tests. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte pardoned a United States Marine convicted of killing a transgender woman in the country nearly 6 years ago, sparking condemnation from activists who described the move as a mockery of justice. In this news out of Manila. And the Philippines has also reported its lowest number of new daily coronavirus cases in nearly 8 weeks. But officials sought to temper optimism and warned of a prolonged battle as the pandemic rages on. Yesterday, South Korea saw the wrath of sea god Haishin, making it the 3rd typhoon to hit the country in the past month. Typhoon Haishin first made landfall on southern Japanese islands, after which it veered towards South Korea. Authorities in both countries struggled to evacuate residents from affected regions amid coronavirus distancing concerns. Haishin has left behind a trail of destruction, damaging buildings, disrupting power supply, and leaving at least 20 people injured. Japanese Coast Guard ships resumed search today for a livestock ship and its 40 missing crew members off Japan's southern islands after the efforts were suspended due to this typhoon. And almost 300 Rohingya Muslims were found on a beach in Indonesia's Aceh province after months at sea. The group arrived at Ujong Blang Beach from one boat and were reported by local residents. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen called for an alliance of democracies to defend against aggressive actions and protect freedom, alluding to Chinese actions in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait as major threats to regional stability. China, which claims democratic Taiwan as its own, has ramped up its military activities around the island as well as in the disputed East and South China Seas. Police in China's Inner Mongolian region have detained at least 23 people following protests last week against a new policy that replaces Mongolian language textbooks with Chinese ones in classrooms. And Chinese leader Xi Jinping today praised China's role in battling the coronavirus pandemic and expressed support for the World Health Organization in a repudiation of U.S. criticism and a bid to rally domestic support for Communist Party leadership. China has passed an extraordinary and historic test with its handling of the coronavirus, he said, at a triumphant awards ceremony for medical professionals decorated with bugle calls and applause. India and China have accused each other today of making provocative military moves and firing warning shots along their disputed border, despite talks on ending the escalation tensions. The Indian army has rejected China's claim that the Indian forces crossed the LAC and fired at Chinese camps. 2 days before External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar meets his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Moscow, there are reports of a scuffle between the Indian Army and an aggressive People's Liberation Army on the Rizang-La-Rechin-La ridgeline, with some injuries sustained by Indian troopers as China wants to unilaterally change the status quo south of Pangong Tso. The centre has ordered the attachment of properties of US-based Sikhs for Justice leader and designated terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannam under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This is the first time that the Indian government has attached property under this act since its amendment last year. He, along with 8 other men, was designated a terrorist by the Union Home Ministry in July this year, has been running a campaign against India and motivating Sikh youngsters in his home state of Punjab to join militancy. With a spike of over 75,000 new cases in the last 24 hours, India's COVID-19 tally continues to surge. And actress Riya Chakraborty has been arrested this morning after being questioned for 5 hours by the Narcotics Control Bureau today. She is the 10th person to be arrested by the central agency in a drugs case linked to the probe into the death of Sushant Singh Rajput. Telangana Chief Minister Chandrasekhar Rao piloted a resolution through the State Assembly to ask the centre to confer the Bharat Ratna, the country's highest civilian award, on former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao to mark his birth centenary being celebrated this year. The death toll from a rock slide in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Mohmand district has risen to 19 today after 6 more bodies were pulled from the rubble by rescue officials. And educational institutions across Pakistan will reopen in phases starting the 15th of this month. A recent study by the Aga Khan University researchers has revealed that 9 out of 10 COVID-19 patients in Karachi were asymptomatic. The confirmed cases in Pakistan, 299,233, with 6,350 deaths reported. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you today.